What is up? Good morning and welcome to a very special edition of Mock It Like It's Hot. For weeks, you guys have tuned in for our Monday reaction show, Monday's Anxiety, and it is going to be back next week to discuss playoff reactions and how it matters for dynasty and fantasy football in general. But Josh had a wonderful idea a few weeks ago of let's go ahead and mock draft for the 2023 season while the 2022 season is very much in play and in our memories. And I absolutely loved it. This was the show that got our Monday show started. I was all in. And before I introduce my co-host, I'm going to throw out there, we have exactly one spot left in the draft. So in all of the chats right now, I'm going to go ahead and drop that link. If one of you guys wants to draft with us, this would be the time to go ahead and click that link and claim that last spot. I think it's the 7th spot, a wonderful spot to pick from. But more importantly, with me as always this Monday, Joshua Hudson. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. The Birds got the 1 seed, baby. Definitely wasn't pretty, but we got it. So that's all that matters.
If you follow along with our normal show, we would have a segment to start off the show called Up with the Birds. I would usually recap yesterday's action. We all know what happened with yesterday's action. So, Josh, I'm going to give you time to talk a little bit about the Eagles. But before we do that, because this is the Mock It Like It's Hot show, I went ahead and got my Mock It Like It's Hot co-host, Austin Amandolia. Austin, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, glad to be here. I'm very excited to get into some 2023 mock drafts. You can already draft some 2023 best ball leagues on Underdog Fantasy, so it's very relevant right now.
God, we're a bunch of psychopaths.
I was going to say, what? I was even just thinking this is fun practice, but Austin's already in game mode. He's like, let's get these best balls done. Let's get this whole thing figured out.
The hustle never ends. Got to take those league winnings and put them into next year.
Absolutely. So, Josh, as always, we call it Up with the Birds. You guys got it done yesterday. Your boy was back in town. Jalen Hurts handled business. Talk to the people about the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it was. He handled business. Definitely didn't look pretty. The offense looked really flat. I mean, Hurts accounted for all of 0 touchdowns. Like, this was the Jake Elliott show, really. Yeah. Bunch of field goals, couldn't really get it done in the red zone, which was really disappointing. But, so a big key to our, red zone success throughout the year has been Jalen Hurts runs. And I feel like with, New York sitting Daniel Jones, with them not activating Saquon and, some of their key starters weren't playing, this kind of had the feel of like, preseason game number 4, where you're really just kind of letting the backup sort of battle it out. So they didn't really want to get Hurts into any sort of trouble. I mean, 229 yards, an interception, 9 carries, 13 yards. Again, not great numbers by any stretch of the imagination. But, usually he's up around 12, 13, sometimes 17 rush attempts. He led all quarterbacks this year with 164 rush attempts. Wow. So, yeah, like you don't want to get your quarterback into harm's way right before the playoffs, especially when he's coming off of a shoulder injury. So the game plan from that perspective made a lot of sense, but only running Miles Sanders 11 times, that felt a little weird. Of course, shout out Boston Scott, the Giant Killer, with another touchdown. Dude has 17 career touchdowns. 10 have come against the Giants. You'll love to see it.
I saw him get into the end zone again yesterday, and I was just like, this is incredible. Like, it just never stops.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic. But, I mean, huge shout out to both A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Both of them set Eagles records. Devonta Smith on the season, 95 receptions. That's the all-time leader amongst wide receivers in Eagles franchise history. And A.J. Brown passed Mike Quick in receiving yards set in a season with 1,496. I mean, all in all, obviously the season's been fantastic for the Eagles. I had my doubts, not necessarily with Hurts, but bringing in the weapons and how much they would ultimately end up throwing the football. And like, I was trying to go back through and look at my projections, and, I was a little up here, a little down here, but overall, like, I felt like I did okay on Hurts, even though he outperformed what I initially thought he would do. But I definitely did not see A.J. Brown coming in with 17 yards per reception and almost 1,500 yards through 17 games. So thank you, A.J. Brown, for shutting me up and making me a believer. That's for damn sure. Because I knew you had talent. I was more concerned with how they were going to utilize having not 1, but 2 really good receiving options. And, obviously Dallas Goedert being out played a little bit of a role in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith getting, more touches and receptions and such. But, definitely can't complain about the season. We got a first round bye to get everybody, back healthy. CJ Gardner-Johnson coming back, 6 interceptions this year. It's going to be a fun postseason, and everybody's already kind of crowning San Francisco and Philly being underdogs. This is what we thrive with. So I'm looking forward to it.
I had to go in and do my playoff predictions for football guys to set people up for playoff pools. We go in and we predict what we think is going to happen in the playoffs. And I couldn't help myself from putting the 2 1 seeds in the Andy Reid revenge game, Eagles versus Kansas City. So Austin, with the playoffs kind of set now, let's just start with this upcoming weekend. Are there any games you particularly have circled that you're looking forward to in this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think 2 really stick out to me. The first is, frankly, the Cowboys playing the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay on Monday.
That's a rematch from last year, right?
And it's also they played each other opening week of the season.
Oh, that's right, they did. Yep. So,
I'm really curious about this because the Cowboys looked bad yesterday. They looked really bad. Like, I was watching that game, I was like, this is not what you need. And Mike McCarthy kept his starters in way deep into the game because I think he was trying to get some momentum going so that Dak Prescott could lead the offense down for a nice touchdown drive, build some confidence and take them out. But it never happened. It just kept stalling, and they had so many 3 and outs. So I'm very curious to see how this one plays out, because I feel like the Cowboys, they're only favored by 3 points, and against a Tampa Bay team that we've been down on most of the year, they can easily upset the Cowboys here, which I think would be catastrophic for that organization, for Mike McCarthy. So I'll be watching that one.
Hilarious. I mean, really,
of course you think that
this is one bad coach against another. And really, the difference is going to be the quarterbacks. It's going to be Tom Brady versus Dak Prescott, in my opinion.
And Prescott has been making plenty of errors lately. He threw another pick six yesterday.
9 straight games or something with an interception or something like that.
I say he got destroyed on social media yesterday. It was not good for his legacy.
Without getting too much into football talk, yesterday he threw a near pick 6, and then the very next play was the pick 6, and it was just what, and it was by the same player. You're like, oh, that seemed like it would have been cool. Let's do it again. It was mind-boggling.
I found it interesting. 3, if I remember correctly, I'm going through it right now. Yeah, 3 divisional matchups to start the weekend: 49ers, Seahawks, Bills, Dolphins, and Bengals, Ravens, all starting the weekend. Josh, do you think we'll see those go the same way they went in the regular season? I believe Bengals swept, didn't they?
No, they Ravens won the first matchup.
Oh, okay.
Bengals obviously got this one when the Ravens had to start a 3rd-string quarterback.
Yeah.
The biggest key to that game is just going to be Lamar Smith, whether he comes back and how healthy he is and how much rust he has to knock off if he does in fact play.
I believe you mean Lamar Jackson, right?
Lamar Jackson. Who did I say?
Okay. Smith. Don't know where that came
from. Yeah, Lamar Jackson. Without Lamar, that Ravens offense is nothing, quite frankly. And I mean, even with him, I think they're going to struggle to beat the Bengals. They've been absolutely red hot of late outside of the no contest. I think they've won 8 straight. So, I mean, they're hot, and they're continuing to stay hot. That offense is 1,000% clicking. And they're going to be a tough draw for, the Bills if they end up playing them, and even for the Chiefs if they end up matching up with them. So,
yeah,
I mean, to me, it's going to be one of those 3 teams out of the AFC: the Bengals,
the Dolphins.
Bills.
The Dolphins are in a tough spot going up against that emotional Bills team.
Well, not even so much that; it's just the quarterback situation.
Yeah,
I mean, if they don't have Tua, they don't stand a chance against the Bills.
Yeah, we don't know what quarterback's going to be starting for them.
All right, we have a pretty raucous crowd in the draft, so I think I'm going to go ahead and probably get us started. And Fantasy Faith jumps in at the last second and takes the last spot. So let me get this draft up on the screen with our girl Faith taking the 7th spot. So this is your regular mock draft. 1 quarterback. I did throw 3 wide receivers in there. We are not focusing on kickers and defense. I kept them out of this draft. It is full PPR. Josh takes the 1st spot. I take the 2nd spot. And Austin, I believe you took 5th, correct? So I'll let you guys talk a little bit about your choice of draft slots, but I am going to go ahead and start this draft. And that will get Josh on the clock here. I can say for certain that our first pick will not time out, which is something, if you tuned into the show during the regular season, the first pick
Tends to happen.
Sleeper doesn't always give the best notifications. And so sometimes the first pick times out. And as planned, Josh goes Christian McCaffrey, which sets me up for what I've been planning on doing the entire time. And I've been talking about it for a month now, taking Travis Kelce at number 2. But we'll get into the picks here in a bit. Josh, talk to me about why you wanted to take the 1 spot.
Well, I wanted to take the 1 spot because I wanted to make sure that A, we didn't time out like we have in the past.
Okay.
But 2, I feel like this needed to be set straight, right? Everybody throughout the entire offseason heading into the 2022 season, it was, oh, I'm going to fade McCaffrey because he's injury prone and Jonathan Taylor's the safe bet. Who got hurt this year and who didn't?
Yeah.
Like, we need to stop with this whole, like, fading a running back because they might possibly get hurt. Like, all of these players are going to get hurt. This is a very violent game. Nobody is set up to not have nicks and cuts and bruises and all this types of stuff throughout a 17-game season, including the playoffs. We saw Jamar Chase miss almost over a month with a hip issue. McCaffrey's been banged up. Jonathan Taylor with the ankle issue. Saquon missed a lot of the last few years. He, really didn't miss any games this year outside of, week 18 due to coach's decision. So, like, we need to kind of chill with this whole, like, oh, I'm going to fade this really awesome player because of X, Y, and Z. Like, no, take the players that are actually good at football. And Christian McCaffrey is the best all-around running back in the NFL. And I don't think that's much of an argument with what he's able to do, not only as a pass catcher, but as a pure runner in between the tackles. And then putting him on San Francisco only gets Kyle Shanahan more creative and using him in so many different ways. We saw him throw a touchdown pass, catch a touchdown pass, and run for a touchdown pass all in the same game. I will take that at the 101 all day, every day.
So, Austin, Josh says this should end the argument. Do you have an argument? If you are the 101, is it McCaffrey?
I mean, it's McCaffrey or frankly, it's Travis Kelce. Like, I can make a case for either one of those two. And I agree with the point that Josh is making. Like, the thing about, oh, this player's injury prone, like, I think I agree with Josh. We've got to stop fixating on that because we often forget during draft season, like, fantasy football is a season long activity. You're playing to win each week and you're playing for a 17-game series. And so you're going to have injuries happen, and every team is going to have injuries happen, and you're going to have to be working the waivers throughout the season. And so we put so much weight on the initial fantasy draft, and obviously the 101 is such a valuable pick to have, but also, like, you're in it for a full season. You have time to make moves when things hit the fan.
Well, and Kyle in the chat brings up, you can't predict injury, and that's 100% true.
Yeah.
And that's something you guys both hit on. But Josh, you were kind of saying this, you can predict great players doing great things when they're on the field. And so bet on the great player. Don't bet on he's injury prone. I always liken this back to Keenan Allen is injury prone because he missed a few games early on in his career. And then he played, I think, 3 consecutive seasons where he didn't miss a game, yet people still wanted to go back to he's injury prone. He misses a game all the time. It's like he doesn't. You're not paying attention at this point. So I love the points you guys made there. And I'm just going to get into my little bit of strategy. And if you guys have never tuned into the show, we are going to talk a little bit about your teams at the end of the show. We're going to mainly focus on players, especially for this one, just because the situations where we're so far out from the 2023 season. With me, I completely agree. At the 101, you could make an argument for Kelce because of the point advantage that he offers, but I knew I was going to take him at 102 as long as McCaffrey goes 101. They are the 1 and they are the 2 for me. And it's all about, I want a 10-point lead on my opponent the second the fantasy season starts. And I have that with him at the tight end spot. Austin, I'm going to let you, for some of our newer viewers, you have a rule proposal that you think would alleviate the shitty tight end wasteland that we are in fantasy football. And we did an entire draft dedicated to this last year, but oddly enough, that was a show you had to miss. You didn't even get to participate in the draft that you inspired. So talk to people a little bit how you think leagues who are down and out on the fantasy tight end could fix that issue.
Yeah. Stop playing tight ends. It's very simple. I've implemented this in my league, in 2 leagues that I commission. get rid of the tight end spot, create a tight end receiver flex spot so that you can place a wide receiver, you can place a tight end if you want. Because the biggest gripe I hear when I bring up like stop playing tight ends is like, oh, well, you're just hurting people who draft Travis Kelce. This solves that problem. Travis Kelce, he is a top 5, top 10 receiver as a tight end almost on an annual basis. And so just creating that receiver flex spot allows for people to still draft Travis Kelce as the elite pass catching player he is, but you also don't get in a situation where you're having to choose between Tyler Conklin and Jelani Woods on a random Sunday of which one of those two is going to make it into the end zone. Like that's the basic solution. Like I would rather play Brandon Ayuk in my receiver flex than take a guess on is Taysom Hill going to pop this week? Who knows? Who's to say?
I really like it. And you brought up where he typically finishes among wide receivers. This year, he would have been tied for the wide receiver 4 with Stephon Diggs. So you're not hurting anybody by doing this. You're just adding a new top 5 wide receiver to the mix there. Our new friend Michael says that we're disrespecting the GOAT, K-Dot. And we gave K-Dot his props during the season, and we hope to see him pop, though it's going to be very interesting. And this is more discussion for the end of the show. Who's the quarterback in Tampa Bay? Speaking of quarterbacks, our buddy Joel sticks with the strategy that he has implemented every draft I think he's been in with us. He wants that same edge that Kelce gives you at tight end. He wants it at quarterback. So Joel takes Patrick Mahomes at the 2-1. Now, the interesting thing about all of this is if you've not done a lot of mock drafts or you don't pay a lot of attention, his next pick is 24 picks away. So there's a good chance he had no chance of getting Patrick Mahomes because, Josh, you and I have been discussing should quarterbacks have a higher value, the top quarterbacks have a higher value because they all provided a 5-point advantage. But then there's the question of, was it a down year for scoring? And a lot of things we've discussed this last week. So, Josh, I'm going to start with you here before Austin makes his pick. So now I'm going to go to Austin because he made his pick. So I'm going to start with you, Austin. How do you feel about Patrick Mahomes going at the end for a guy like Joel who knows the advantage he provides and knows he's probably not going to get another bite at that apple?
Yeah, I think also knowing Joel, he's a 0 running back drafter. And so this is very in line with his draft. And so I very much respect getting that positional advantage. So I'm here for it. I think I'm very curious to see how quarterbacks are going to go this year because last offseason, we were preaching nonstop, don't draft a quarterback until rounds 8 through 10, if then, because the quarterback position was so deep that you could wait that long and get the right quarterback. Well, as we're going to discuss on our rankings accountability show on Thursday night, the quarterback position was way more volatile this year than we had originally expected. Quarterbacks we thought were going to be top 10 ended up outside of the QB1 slot. And quarterbacks we weren't even thinking of drafting in earlier rounds or were going undrafted in leagues ended up finishing in the top 10. Yeah. So I am a little bit worried that we might see overreactions this year of like, I have to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks this year. And I feel like this past season might end up being an outlier where defenses really adjusted their scheme to deal with these elite quarterbacks. And next season, the offenses are going to have their counterpunch and we're going to see kind of a more rebalancing back to more quarterbacks being able to find success in fantasy leagues.
There you go. And our buddy Joel, huge Packers fan, he said he's just going to bitter rage draft all of the Packers after the loss last night. Joel kind of was one of the proponents of the young wide receivers in Green Bay last year, and it took a little while for that to come to fruition. Josh, what is your take on the early quarterbacks? Because you and I touched on this a few Mondays ago, which is what made this an interesting topic to me, because Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen provided about a 5-point positional advantage. Do you think we see a draft overreaction? Do you think it's a worthy overreaction at this point? Or do you think we maybe see quarterback scoring stabilize and everybody be a closer knit group next year?
So I'm going to put this out there. I was strongly considering Josh Allen at the 301.
Okay.
I really was, especially here in a 12 team. I think that gives you a wholehearted advantage over the rest of the league, locking in, 27, 28 points per game right off the rip. That you're probably not going to get by sitting back and waiting at the quarterback position. I think that you're definitely going to see some quarterbacks that are going to make some leaps next year. I mean, we saw a pretty solid leap from Trevor Lawrence this year. from his rookie year. We definitely saw a pretty solid leap from Justin Fields from year 1 to year 2. And, now that the Bears have the number 1 pick, I think a lot of people are going to be, is this going to be an Arizona situation where they move on from Fields because, this new coaching staff can get quote unquote their guy and maybe, all this. There's going to be a lot of reasons to not pick Justin Fields, but with what he's able to do with his legs, the amount of cap space this team has, and the potential draft haul that they can get by moving the 101 and hanging on to Fields, you have to assume that he's going to get an upgrade in weapons. And he's going to be a steal even in round 7 or 8 because of what he can do with his legs. But, there's going to be young quarterbacks that can make that leap. So I'm okay waiting a couple rounds, solidifying that wide receiver room, especially in this league where you're starting 3 wide receivers, right? If it were only 2, I might have maybe gone the Josh Allen, the quarterback route, or maybe doubled up at running back. But the one thing that I've seen this year, probably more so than other years, as long as you play this sort of like hero RB, you get that one solid anchor, you can rotate in running backs at that RB2 spot, and you're just going to deal with getting an 8-point floor every week and just be happy with it because the wide receivers provide you that 25 to 30 point ceiling on a given week. And I think I've locked that in with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jalen Waddle here.
Yeah, and I think you guys hit every correct point that we need to hit with these quarterbacks. That as long as you're going to get the production, they make it worth it in the earlier rounds. When I set up my queue for this, and if you guys haven't watched the show before, I'm very big on setting a queue for real drafts, mock drafts, however you want to do your drafting. And the reason I say that is, if there comes a moment where one of your guys gets snagged a pick before, you don't want to have to scramble to scroll and find a guy, and I get to use my queue for that exact thing. But when I set up my queue, I wanted to set it up for every viable fantasy quarterback that I'm willing to start on a fantasy team next year. We're in a 12-team league for this mock draft. There were 11 picks, 11 quarterbacks who I say I will start. So I can't be the last guy to take my quarterback unless someone makes a mistake. And as I always do when I talk about someone making a mistake, I'm going to go to my best friend in this draft, Faith, and she's going to yell at me for picking on her. Faith took Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts, folks. I'm just going to let you go in for a little bit, Josh. How do we feel about that pick based on the season that these gentlemen have had?
Wrong. Sorry, I needed a little bitty from one of my favorite shows, Scrubs. But
that was rough.
Look, I know Justin Herbert is all cool, and he's fun. He can sling it with the best of them. But as great as he was, quote unquote, slinging it this year, it led to like QB 11 numbers, QB 12. Like, give me the legs of Jalen Herbert. My God, it's way too early for this. Jalen Hurts. Because of what he's able to do with his legs. I mean, 164 rush attempts, like, just come on. Yeah. Herbert should not be picked probably before round like 6 or 7 in this type of draft. Like, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it was the first one to jump out at me, so I'm picking on Faith. Austin, I'm going to go with a different gear for you rather than just giving Faith a hard time. We're starting to see the tight ends go, and this is more how I expected and kind of wanted tight ends to go last year. And we see Travis Kelce go super early, and now we see the grouping starting in round 3 of Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, and TJ Hawkinson, who certainly put his name into the conversation this year. Is this how you feel the tight ends should go? Should we see the 3 to 4 grouping versus none of them going in round 2? Would you be happier if they went later? How do you foresee tight ends going in drafts heading into next season?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to shift a lot over time. I feel like the ordering of these 4 is what's most interesting to me, that Mark Andrews is still going as the tight end 2 because he had a rough season. And of course, a lot of that was due to Lamar Jackson being absent and that offense just not functioning very well. And I think that's probably why you're going to see this pattern continue, is you can tell the story of why each of like the 3 of these 5 tight ends, or I guess really all 4, of why these tight ends didn't perform as we would expect them to. Mark Andrews without Lamar Jackson, Kyle Pitts got hurt, and also when Marcus Mariota was in the offense, that offense couldn't function. And so you could see people talking themselves into Kyle Pitts again. I'll probably be waiting a little bit later this year because the drop off from Kels was so drastic. I don't want to get involved in that again. But yeah.
You are up. I don't want you to miss your pick. So I first want to throw out Faith defending herself as she always does with all the sass. She's just here so we can start the draft. She doesn't give a fuck. Thank you, Faith. That's pretty much Faith's draft strategy every time. She's just there so the league is filled. Don't get me wrong. Faith is a hell of a fantasy player. She takes advice from the right people, and she was a top 300 player in Scott Fishbowl, I believe, this year. So just don't let Faith fool you. Michael defending Faith that Herbert is definitely over Hurts, alphabetically speaking. So there you go. Our buddy George chiming in. George, big friend of the show. He's just here because last night's game crushed his soul. Told all his friends that the Lions team with nothing to play for is far scarier than the playoff pressure, and he is hoping Aaron Rodgers retires. Austin, you were a big defender of Aaron Rodgers during our mock draft season and our ranking season. What is your take on what should Aaron Rodgers do now? Is it time to hang him up? Does he move on? I think there's a market for Aaron Rodgers, and do we buy into the complicated fella with his, I think I better hold on to this jersey? Is this just cryptic Aaron Rodgers? What's your take right now?
Well, I think first off, defending Aaron Rodgers is like a little bit overstating it. I just said he was going to be a QB1. That's all. I'm not out here. I'm not, I don't love the guy. Anyways, I do think, I don't know. It's really interesting. And I think I agree. We should be careful to read into any kind of random statement by Aaron Rodgers because he loves to toy with people in the media and shape a narrative and keep people on their edge and keep people intrigued and build his brand. Like the mystery about him is why we continue to compel ourselves to him, besides the fact that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think as of now, I feel like the most likely scenario for him is to probably test out free agency and just see what can happen and where he could end up next year.
So is he a free agent? Is the contract up?
No. I think he would have to be traded.
He signed a 3-year. He signed a 3-year.
Oh, that's right.
But I do think he would explore the trade market, and I think there is a market for him. And I don't see him retiring. Like, I could see him maybe thinking like, oh, I should go out while I'm still somewhat on top. But he didn't really decline much this year. Like, the offensive system didn't work this year. Yeah. And so I feel like he still has another year or two. He could go and kind of put his final stamp on his Hall of Fame candidacy. But
it's almost like he was missing an alpha wide receiver, and that maybe hurt the offense a little bit. Josh, do we maybe see him reunite with said alpha wide receiver? Is there a market for Aaron Rodgers with the Las Vegas Raiders?
No, I think if Aaron Rodgers goes anywhere, it's going to be San Francisco. Just my personal opinion. He's from Northern California. It's where he played college ball. He's always kind of flirted with the idea of going back and playing there. And, I think a lot will depend how this season ultimately ends for San Francisco. You've seen some of these games with Brock Purdy. I think he's what I see on the game yesterday. He's only the second rookie quarterback ever in NFL history to have 6 straight games of 2 or more touchdown passes.
Yep.
And that's coming from the guy who was the literal last pick in the NFL draft.
Mr. Irrelevant.
Correct. So it's just kind of like, maybe they make it, with Brock Purdy. If they ultimately do win a Super Bowl, I think then, as I mentioned a couple Mondays ago, like, you're basically looking at a RG3 Kirk Cousins situation with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, right? So I could very easily see a scenario where San Francisco just trades Trey Lance to try to recoup some of that draft capital they gave up to trade up to get him, and then ride forth with the 7th rounder because apparently they struck gold. But if Purdy ends up faltering and the front office says, you know what, this season is a lot different if we have somebody with more skill, more talent, a track record, you could probably see a scenario where they're going to start reworking some things, maybe moving. And I talked about this before. Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey are very redundant in this offense. You signed Deebo Samuel because at that point in time, you needed to sign him. But now you don't really need him on the roster. but to fit that cap hit of an Aaron Rodgers in San Francisco, you need to move on from some of these, higher priced guys a la Deebo Samuel. So if you're making a move to go get a veteran like Aaron Rodgers to drop into this offense with a Brandon Ayuk, a Christian McCaffrey, a George Kittle, you move on from Deebo Samuel. If you put Deebo Samuel in Green Bay where he becomes, a number one guy for a Jordan Love, or maybe they move Trey Lance over there as well, I think that kind of works for both parties in that sense, right? Just my personal opinion.
Our buddy Czar chiming in that Purdy won him a championship yesterday. So
there you
he
go.
Obviously has a place in Czar's heart. And the Seahawks making the playoffs won Donnie Tubbs $200 yesterday. So we love to see that kind of stuff there. Absolutely. I'm gonna take a look at the pick 103 team. We obviously have Josh and I at pick 101, pick 102. Austin, our good buddy Zach said he was going to take Komet 103. Zach, already a liar this early in the morning, does not want to tell us the truth when it comes to the draft. But he did start off interesting. He went with a very balanced approach. Conventional fantasy wisdom is balanced approaches, running back first, then wide receiver. He went the other way around. And so he starts off with Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and then Mike Williams as a wide receiver 3. There's not a whole lot you can argue with that type of draft. However, DeAndre Swift and Tony Pollard are two very interesting running backs. Tony Pollard with an amazing season. He's a free agent. DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams is a free agent. Is DeAndre Swift an RB1 whether or not Jamal Williams is in town? Are you expecting a bounce back next season?
I have no clue.
Sound analysis, Austin.
I mean, it's a fair answer. At least he's not lying to us like Zach.
I mean, this is fair. This is fair.
Watching the game last night, I was like, oh, yeah, DeAndre Swift. I can get into this. He's getting like 8 targets. Like, that's what you want in a PPR fantasy running back receiver. But then I think back about the rest of the year, and every time that they get to the 5-yard line and it's just Jamal Williams up the gut, I'm like, I don't know. And also, I kind of struggle with the way that DeAndre Swift runs the ball in general. Like, he does a lot of toe tapping to like try and like make defenders miss. And he doesn't just get upfield as much as I would like him to. Like, there were several plays last night where I'm like, you could have gotten another 3 to 5 yards if you had just like taken the route that was open and just put your head down and gotten those yards. And, I'm not an NFL running back, so who am I to like judge? But that's just an observation I had where I don't really love his running style. I think this one's really going to depend on what happens during the offseason. I could see it going either way. I mean, we even saw Justin Jackson getting snaps down the stretch. And it wasn't just a Jamal Williams thing. It was a Detroit wanting to run a running back by committee model thing.
And there was even a Detroit reporter who, when there was week 17, when Justin Jackson was out, they were like, keep in mind, Craig Reynolds is healthy again. And it's like, so we're just finding every reason to keep the third running back involved in Detroit. And that's a little scary. So like you said, it's not like, and Josh, we talk about this all the time, the vacated targets, the vacated carries. We can't just pretend that if Jamal Williams leaves town, DeAndre Swift is all of a sudden a 3-down bell cow back. They're going to get somebody else involved there.
Yeah, I'm kind of out on Swift. I mean, I love him as an RB2, and I think that's kind of where he should be at. He's an RB2 that has kind of that like mid to low end RB1 upside simply because he is a very efficient runner when he touches the football. We know the talent, but again, in this situation, in this system that they're using in in Detroit with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator, they're rotating these running backs. They're getting Jamal Williams touches. They're getting DeAndre Swift touches. They're getting Justin Jackson touches. If Ben Johnson moves on, then yeah, maybe I'm going to reevaluate how we start looking at Swift going into 2023, depending on who ends up taking over in this offense and calling the plays and how that's going to go. But I mean, I hate dubbing players injury prone.
Yeah, we literally just talked about this.
Yeah, and DeAndre Swift, I mean, got banged up last night. I mean, it was a pretty unfortunate situation. I mean, he got rolled up on his ankle and then clubbed in the face. Like, could have very easily left with a concussion. But, like, he just doesn't seem like a kind of guy that can even handle 15 touches a game on average throughout a whole season. And that worries me when I'm investing a top 36 pick in a guy or top 24 pick in a guy as, we're looking at some of these drafts.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I was looking for a specific player, and Josh, you got him, so I will save it later for later analysis. I'm just going to keep moving along. I like to try to make sure we talk about every team at least one time. And another one of our viewers, Michael, went ahead and chimed in. Michael is actually at the 104, and he wants to make sure that when we discuss his Javonte Williams pick, it is with Sean Payton as the head coach in his mind. And Josh, you are a person who has never been a big Javonte Williams guy. You like him, but you definitely don't like him as a flat out top 5, top 10 RB. Does Sean Payton make a difference for you? And when you look at Mikey's team, and I don't mean to his Twitter handle or whatever is Mikey, he stacks Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. He goes very wide receiver heavy, which makes sense in a league where you can start 3 wide receivers, not to mention 2 flex, so 5 wide receivers in a full PPR league. However, his only running back going into his 8th pick is the aforementioned Javonte Williams. So my question to both of you is, I'm going to start with you, Josh, is does Sean Payton make a difference to you? Does it help him a little bit as someone who I know was kind of down on Javonte last season?
Well, I will put this on record. Sean Payton's not going to Denver.
Okay.
If the Saints hold strong on their belief that they want not only a first-round pick in return for Sean Payton, but more than a first-round pick, he's not going to Denver. You cannot justify giving up the amount of draft capital that they gave up to the Seahawks to go get Russell Wilson, and then on top of that, give up more just to get a head coach. That is how you destroy team building, like through and through. Like if we were talking about a quarterback who was 24, 25 years old, I'd be fine with it because you know exactly what you're getting over the long haul or what you should be getting over the long haul. But you're talking about a quarterback who's approaching his mid-30s already. And that's just a recipe for disaster for that franchise and organization. But for the sake of this game, let's pretend that Denver does something stupid, give up a ton of draft picks on top of what they gave up for Wilson, and they land Sean Payton. My biggest issue with Javonte Williams is not going to be the system. It's he tore his ACL and his MCL, if I'm not mistaken. Or PCL, or he had multiple knee issues.
2 CLs are gone out of that knee.
2 CLs are gone. Correct. We saw this exact situation with J.K. Dobbins this year. They rushed him back in a way, was very not efficient, ended up on IR again this year before finally coming back down the stretch.
Fully healthy and looking good.
Yeah, exactly, which is fantastic. But now you're putting that amount of pressure on Williams to be your RB1 and you're 8 picks in, 7 picks in, whatever it is, and he's your only running back. I'm fine playing a hero RB strategy. Like that's kind of the idea that I wanted to go with when I took McCaffrey 101 in this. But, I'm sitting there at the 5th round. Like, why is Ramondre Stevenson still here? The guy's a top 10 running back.
That might have been the guy who I was looking for to figure out. And I was like, oh, son of a
bitch. You consider yourself water and you make the moves when you can make them. But I'm fine going that hero RB route. I'm not trusting Javonte Williams to be that guy for me is what I'm getting at.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of the best takeaway from that is the system may not matter so much for a back like Javonte Williams. Austin, what is your take? So at this point, Mikey did call out in the chat. I don't have the chat right up here in front of me that our buddy Zach has just been sniping him the entire draft. But just kind of looking over his team where he just now added his RB2 second-year player Tyler Algier. Algier is one of those guys where we're not sure if he has a job after the draft, but we're doing this draft hella early, so I'm not going to hold that necessarily against him, but that's kind of the point of what we're discussing here. So I'd love for you to add your 2 cents on Javonte Williams, but more importantly, kind of Mikey's team build at the 104.
Yeah, I think on the Javonte Williams topic, I think for me, it makes me think about like broader strategy if you're doing some of those underdog way too early 2023 drafts. The good thing about those drafts is they're only like 3 or 4 person drafts. I think max you have a 6-person draft. So the player pool is much smaller in general. And I like in that kind of mindset, in that strategic mindset, to get a couple of players that you might be able to get at a value that could really pop for your team. I wouldn't anchor my team around them though, is the thing. I would have a good foundation that I know where they're going to be. I know what that system is going to be going into next season because the players and the coaching staff are fairly consistent. I haven't been a big Javonte Williams person at his value. Like, I am not willing to spend a pick in the first 3 rounds to go after him.
Yeah.
But I do recognize he had a lot of PPR value this year, and now Melvin Gordon's not there, so that really helps. Yeah, I think what I'm noticing about this draft and even my own draft strategy right now is it's really hard to figure out when to take that second running back and which one to take because there is so much uncertainty right now in the running back position. Like, some of that's due to contracts, some of that's due to injuries, some of it's due to coaching turnover, some of it's due to just backs being on really bad teams. And so I think for the purposes of, like, if you literally are drafting now, I'm fine with waiting as long as Mike did to get that second running back. It's going to be interesting to see, like, throughout free agency how that shifts. But I'm kind of loading up on receivers right now because there's more certainty in how they're going to have fantasy success.
Yeah, you walked away, and I'm not going to get too much into your team. I like to save that for the end of the show, but you walked away with 2 guys in Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave that I was eyeballing. Wide receiver got away from me, but that's going to be a discussion for the end of the draft. Looking at the number 5 team, Josh, Jonathan Taylor, last year's basically consensus 101, last year's basically hot topic that he would not be the RB1 again. And it turns out those people were right. Shout out to our buddy Steve Lawson, who was very adamant about Jonathan Taylor not being the 101 again. So Jonathan Taylor falls to the 106. He is the second running back still taken because everybody is kind of leaning towards wide receivers. How do you feel about Taylor next year, not knowing a ton about the Indianapolis Colts? But more importantly, how do you feel about all these wide receivers going over Taylor?
I'm fine with the wide receivers going over Taylor. I personally would have had Eckler as my RB2.
Interesting.
Again, you're not judging Taylor based on situation as you are, or excuse me, you're not judging him so much on talent as you are situation, right? Because we know how talented he is. A healthy Jonathan Taylor is still going to have 4.5 yards to carry, probably even on a suspect offense. The offensive line in Indy just fell absolute on their face this year. Like, I don't know where that came from, but there's going to be a lot of turnover there, not just in the players, but also the coaching staff. So when that coaching staff comes into play, you're going to start looking at this situation like, okay, are we going to start talking ourselves into Jonathan Taylor being a top 1 or 2 guy because he once ran for 1,800 yards in a season? Like, it's just one of those things where when these guys consistently perform and they have those spike seasons, you're like, all right, that's a top guy because I've already seen it. Whereas, with someone like I'll even throw Javonte Williams out there. Like, you're just banking on the potential because you assume that he can get to certain levels, right? So you're banking on that potential, that upside. Whereas with someone like a Jonathan Taylor, all you're doing is you're just doubting whether he can stay healthy because one season he missed a few games. So, for me, I'm okay putting Taylor in that top 3. And I'm fine with the wide receivers going ahead of him just because this is a passing league now. It really is. And I saw a stat on Twitter. I think there was only 7 running backs last year that topped 1,000 yards. And then this year, I think that jumped up to almost 16. So, but again, we saw some of these like bad teams that were running more, which I found really strange in all honesty. I mean, the Atlanta Falcons.
It's like they just don't care. It's so the Houston Texans.
Same thing. Exactly.
It's also it was also like the cycle of football in general. Like, defenses had been building their teams to stop the pass, and so they had smaller, faster guys. And so then you saw offenses say, "Okay, we're just going to truck you all day long."
Yeah.
And teams found a lot of success with that. There were so many teams that had 200-yard rushing days and would win games that way, and we haven't seen that in a long time.
No, I'm with you 100%. But, and again, and that's where I'm kind of like, I think next year we'll kind of course correct a little bit. A lot of people are going to start, taking the wide receivers early because so many of the top guys popped. And then you'll start seeing those running backs start to float back up to the top because of X, Y, and Z. And Austin brought out a great point. Like, we saw how great these wide receivers are. Teams are adjusting. They're playing a lot more high-low coverage. So these, offensive coordinators are saying, okay, well, let's run more play action. Let's do some draw plays. Let's just run the ball more in general. And we're going to gain 5 yards off the gate.
Yeah.
And they're just going to be more efficient on the ground. So you're going to start seeing more of these running backs kind of float towards the top, even if they're not being thrown the ball enough to where we can consistently count them in the top 24 at the running back position in PPR scoring.
Yep. Michael with a wonderful comment to defend his take that, Nathaniel Hackett was given the real Urban Meyer vibe. And I think that's a great take, and they could certainly be better next year. When we get to talking about my wide receivers, you'll see that I'm hoping that they are better next year, because it kind of shook out that way for me. I'm going to keep moving along. Don Flicht here has kind of went into auto draft mode, but before he went into auto draft mode, or she went into auto draft mode, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown stack, Josh, which I know warms your heart, but for both of you, I kind of want to give you a chance to talk about this. We are seeing in this draft specifically, and this is a thing in best ball, and it's certainly a thing in DFS, and I wonder if that's what's leaking into this draft. We're seeing more stacks than I typically see in a normal draft. We've seen the Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow stack, the Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown stack, the Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen stack, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, and I'm sure there's probably another one or two in there that I'm missing. Josh, do you think this is a strategy people are going to start employing more and more in redraft because of how it affects the correlation in best ball and even DFS play? Or is it the DFS play that's kind of influencing this right now because everyone's kind of in a DFS mindset?
I think it probably leans more of the best ball variety, because in the offseason, those are the drafts that everybody's doing. So that's just kind of on their mind. I still stand by the idea that stacks and redraft can be very dangerous. They're very hit or miss. Again, it is a week-to-week game that you're playing, even though it is season long. But for me, it just boils down to, I want the best players at the position that I'm drafting, plain and simple. So if the stack happens, it happens, but I'm not going out of my way to reach for that quarterback or reach for the weapon. I tend to look at stacks more in tournament play, especially in best ball or, Scott Fishbowl. That's a huge other beast in and of itself. But yeah. So, that's where I'm looking more at the stack front. Again, not really trying to purposely employ it in redraft. So that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Austin, you're a big DFS guy. You read our DFS article for Club Fantasy. So again, stacking is something that I think kind of gained prevalence in DFS. That's because DFS was kind of a bigger thing before best ball. Best ball, we'll see entire team stacks where they're trying to get multiple wide receivers, multiple tight ends from the same team. How do you feel? Do you agree with Josh? It's kind of dangerous moving into redraft. Do you think, again, that it's only because of when we're holding this draft that we're seeing such an emphasis on stacks?
I think it depends a little bit on how you're stacking. So in DFS and in best ball, you'll see people double stacking. They'll target certain games. They'll bring back players from the opposing team. And so you'll have lineups that have 3 to 5 players all from the same matchup in any given week. And I definitely don't recommend doing that in redraft, because that is an easy way for like half your team to hit or miss. What I am okay with in redraft is what people seem to be doing, which is skinny stacking, where it's just you get a quarterback and you get their number one receiver and you get out and you move along. And I think that is an appropriate strategy for redraft, particularly for the quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, like those guys where their number one target is very clear. I'm very much fine with it.
Yeah, Josh. So I'm gonna hit the quarterbacks now. We've kind of had, if I'm seeing this correctly, I think everyone has addressed the quarterback position except for Maddie. But hopefully I'm not putting Maddie in a bad situation here. I'm not going to hold the 2 quarterback strategy against Don because it was an auto pick thing. So I mentioned that there were 11 quarterbacks that I saw as viable fantasy options for next season, and they have all went less 2, unless I'm missing one. So I want to talk about 2 very controversial quarterbacks, I guess. Kirk Cousins has not went yet, and I find that interesting with him being tied to Justin Jefferson, him being a perpetual 4,000-yard guy. The touchdowns are usually there. What is your take, guys, on Kirk Cousins? And then the other one I'm just going to throw out there is Tua Tagovailoa. I understand the controversy around, is he the quarterback next year? But he's tied to two of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So these guys at this point in the draft have not went yet. This feels eerily like the how have Tom Brady and Matt Stafford not went yet argument that we had last year. But Josh, I'm going to start with you here. Kirk Cousins, Tua Tagovailoa, still on the board when we just talked about the value of quarterback.
It's a little baffling. I actually was considering Cousins over Dak when I took Dak at the 901, simply because, I mean, he's tied to the best wide receiver in football right now. And, I mean, that alone has its value. But
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of similarities with Dak and with Kirk. And right now you're seeing kind of the ebbs and flows with Dak in that, you know, he's throwing a lot of interceptions. But the way that the Cowboys operate, they're going to go and find a competent wide receiver 2 for CeeDee Lamb, and that's going to help spread that offense around. So I think I trust. Yeah, thanks, Zach.
Zach Ritchie, just chiming in there.
Yeah, this is unfortunately not the first time that I've taken Dak, and it probably won't be the last.
Spoiler alert, Josh, Dak is not on my list of 11 quarterbacks I'm considering next year. So I find it interesting. You may need to defend that pick, especially after
I think you're tired of being burned by the fact that you consistently have Dallas. You overproject the Cowboys every single year. And the way that I'll defend that, I'm not thinking that Dak is going to be a top 5 quarterback. I'm thinking that he's going to be a low end QB1, which isn't really that different from a Kirk Cousins, a Daniel Jones, a Tua Tagovailoa. So for me, I'm going to take the guy that I think, you know, is going to keep throwing the football, because that's what Dallas is going to do.
And I'm just going to stick with this conversation. And Josh, I'm going to stick with you since Austin has a pick coming up. Matty goes quarterback, and he goes Danny Dimes over Tua. And I don't want to keep harping on this, but let's just focus specifically on Daniel Jones. Josh, is Daniel Jones the quarterback of the Giants next year? And better yet, if he's not, where is he to make this a viable pick?
I think Daniel Jones sticks in New York with the Giants. I don't think that they're in a situation to where they can move on from him, simply because then you're literally hitting the reset button after taking a bad team to the playoffs. And that's just bad football. That's how you lose the locker room. That's how you lose the confidence of your coaching staff if you're the GM. You know, they're going to make an effort to bring back Daniel Jones, whether it's on the franchise tag or some sort of, you know, short, like 2 to 3 year incentive laden, like, you know, 30 million plus a year deal, which is pretty commonplace for a fringe starter. But again, we've seen Daniel Jones play really well. The big downfall with Jones in the past has been turnovers. Guess what? He didn't do a lot this year. He didn't turn the ball over a ton.
Exactly.
And we see the value in his legs from a fantasy perspective.
That's what I was going to say. Yep.
You know, it makes a ton of sense here to go above Tua, especially with, because for me, I feel like with Jones, it's about, does he return to New York? And I think that's a pretty easy yes. With Tua, it's, these concussions are real and they're a problem. Like, this is life or death kind of stuff. So that to me is a lot more serious of a question than will Daniel Jones be back in New York as the Giants quarterback?
So I was going to have you go in on that one a little bit, Austin, since you've just made your pick. Is it the concussions with Tua? Is it the fear that they just want to move on with guys like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers on the market? Let's not forget Miami is in trouble and lost the draft pick because of tampering with Tom Brady. So there's clearly an interest there between organization. So is that what you think is keeping people off of Tua, is the concussions? Because it's a very serious thing. Don't by any means get me wrong. I just find it interesting of what it's doing to his draft capital right now.
Yeah, I think it definitely very much is the health thing. At least that's what it is to me. I'm not in the place yet where I'm speculating of whether or not he would be the quarterback next year or not, assuming full health. Because also, like, the chances Miami goes back after Tom Brady after they just got in trouble with him, like, I don't know that they're going to really go that direction. So I think to me, the most important thing is to his health. And once that is sorted out, then I will feel more comfortable figuring out where to draft him. I think as of now, like, he's probably not a starting quarterback for me in fantasy football because of that. Just because, again, he needs to take the time to make whatever decision feels best for him to make sure, he is able to live his life how he wants. And until we get clarity on that, I think it makes sense for people to avoid him. Also, we still have 12 quarterbacks that are draftable, I think, or at least close to. And so
if
there
you
will be
consider
some
Dak,
waiver
Dak
wire
would be the
action.
12th for me. So
yeah, and so there will still be some waiver wire action that you could have in a redraft league. I do think, look, if you're doing best ball, you're going to want 2 quarterbacks, and so you may, if you're in a deeper best ball league, that's a 12 teamer, then maybe taking Tua late is a good strategy. Just assuming that his health comes back. In that scenario, you probably want to take a 3rd quarterback for best ball. But I think it's really about the health to me. I'm not too caught up in how free agency shakes out at this point.
I'm going to get some breaking news here, Josh. Cliff Kingsbury no longer an Arizona Cardinal. So
as it should be.
As it should be. We've been talking about it forever. Josh, you were pretty damn adamant that Sean Payton will not be a Denver Bronco. Is Sean Payton in play for Arizona? Are they a team with what they've invested in their offense to this point and recently in the draft and their defense at this point? Are they a team that could pay that first round plus to pry Sean Payton away from the New Orleans Saints?
I'm going to say no, only because who in their right mind is trying to build a quality team and then trade a top 5, top 7 draft pick for a head coach?
I did not occur to me how high their pick is. Yeah, that's an impossible.
So to me, the only way that they part with a first is if it's a 2024 first, right?
Okay.
Like you're going a little bit further in the future in that instance because you want to be able to get the coach top 3, Joel. Thank you. Yeah. So like you're not parting with a top 3, top 4, top 5 pick for a head coach, because a head coach isn't on the field making these play calls. And so I think that takes that out of the realm, because if you're the Cardinals, right, you want to be able to put the head coach in with talent. Well, you spend a top 3 pick on talent to give that head coach something to work with. So there's a lot to dissect on that front. But for Sean Payton, he wants control, right? He wants this, Bill Belichick-esque, like, I want to bring in somebody that can make the decisions that I want for the team that I'm coaching and running, etc. So, some team has to, meet that level of demands on top of meeting the demands of the Saints organization. And it's going to take a perfect storm to do it. And I don't think Arizona will be that organization. Just my thought process.
Yeah. Austin, I'm going to ask you to compare 2 teams here before we start getting into the breakdown of our teams. I'm going to call it A-Brock 21 and then our buddy Joel. A-Brock started in an auto draft. I paid attention to this, and the auto draft went heavy running back, starting the draft with Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara in the 4th round, an interesting value. Then Brock took over and had to obviously load up on wide receivers and grabs Justin Fields in the 7th. Meanwhile, Joel, we all knew this was coming, is a 0 RB drafter. So he starts off no running backs until the 7th and then just completely dives in. So I kind of want you to take a look at A-Brock's team and see how you feel like the recovery happened there, because she fell victim to the auto draft and then recovers by going wide receiver and grabbing his running back, grabbing tight end, just kind of filling in his roster. So how do you feel about the recovery there, knowing that it was an auto draft that went running back heavy to start?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of the receivers that they were able to get, they recovered very well. And the fact that they landed Justin Fields in the 7th round, like that's an incredible value. I think this is part of why you'll see people maybe shy away from really heavy running back in the early rounds, because I feel like the Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara grouping, like a year ago, 2 years ago, that would sound incredible.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be a lot of open questions now about several of those players, in part because of how they performed last season, in part because of their situation going into next year. Like Dalvin Cook, his efficiency was kind of down. He didn't play the dominant role we've seen him play historically with the Vikings having a new offensive system. Najee Harris, I think a lot of his struggles early in the season were probably coming off of an injury and still working through that, but he didn't really perform where he was drafted last year. Josh Jacobs, obviously he was incredible, but we don't know where he's going to play next year. And I think one of the lessons from this past season is where the system you're in can play a big role in how well certain players perform. And then Alvin Kamara, the Saints offense was weird this year, and they were very gross, and Kamara did not take on the lead role that he typically has. So I think starting with 4 running backs like that is tough, but I think the overall recovery with the receivers worked well. I actually really like Joel's lineup more than I typically like
how we always think we will.
a 0 running back lineup. My one problem with it is having James Conner and Rashad Penny. I think I like those picks for when they're healthy. And I worry a little bit about the age with those two. They are starting to get older in terms of running backs, and so they may see some drop off this year, but I think he played his strategy very well.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have you guys break down your strategy. You don't need to talk about every player. You can talk about what you planned on doing, talk about players as you feel like it. Let me first ask live on air. Do any of you need to get out of here at 12? Austin, I know you're a working man. Okay. I know Josh doesn't. We kind of know this show goes over anymore. So perfectly. Let me know if you need to get out of here. So I'm going to have you guys break down your team player by player, pick by pick, or if you just want to give an overview. I'm going to put you both on the spot towards the end of the show to pick your favorite teams, and I will pick a team I don't like because that's the theme of the show. So, Josh, take it away.
I mean, for me, it was, again, I wanted to start with who I think is the best player, and that's Christian McCaffrey. From there, it really just kind of boiled down to, because I'm on an end, sometimes you got to reach for certain players, certain positions. I tried not to get into I'm going to reach for that, that second running back spot. The real big question for me came at the 412, because I'm going through and I'm staring at, who's available. And I strongly considered Mike Evans here over DJ Moore. And I considered Evans again over Ramondre Stevenson. But for me, if I can get a top 10 running back in the 5th round, I'm going to do that all day and twice on Sunday. So that was a pretty easy one for me. But when it came down to DJ Moore versus Mike Evans, yes, I understand the consistency that Evans brings, even if, he's going to have 9 straight weeks of sub wide receiver 3 performances. We know what he's able to do in championship week.
We certainly do.
But, both of these guys have quarterback questions. We don't know who's going to be the quarterback in Carolina. We don't know if Brady ends up moving on. So for me, this boiled down to who's the top weapon on their offense.
Yeah.
And right now that's DJ Moore. So that's why I sided with DJ Moore over Mike Evans here. Tyler Lockett just felt like a smash for me. And then you getting down here in, the 7, 8, 9, 10 range. I knew I needed to take a quarterback. I knew I needed to take a tight end at some point. Evan Ingram, I think, will likely re-sign with Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville would be crazy to not bring him back. And the way that they utilize him is how we want tight ends utilized. They use him like a wide receiver. He's going to see a ton of targets. And I think that when we're talking about the tight end position and Evan Ingram specifically, as we get closer into the summer, when mock drafts really start heating up in July, you're going to see Evan Ingram going off the board probably about 4 rounds higher. So for me in the 10th round, this was a steal.
So you kind of stole my thunder there, because that's what I was going to say is, obviously I may take Travis Kelce or die in the 1st round guy, but if I do get sniped by Joel, because I know Joel feels that way as well, Evan Ingram in the 10th, I'd be all over that, like every single day of the week versus any of those mid-round guys. So I thought that was a really great pick. Your DJ Moore pick broke my heart, because I was waiting to see if I could get him one pick later. It was a judgment call that clearly failed. And then Ramondre Stevenson is just robbery. I didn't need running back. I definitely would have went Stevenson over Jones. That was just a flat.
Well, to be fair, you took Breece Hall from me because I was ready to take him at 212.
I kind of figured it was.
Hey, back some picks, motherfucker.
There you go. Austin, you know the deal. You've done this a million times. Talk about your team, buddy.
Yeah. So I kind of focused a bit on receivers early. Apart from Travis Etienne, I kind of did that anchor RB strategy. What sticks out to me about my lineup that I'm thrilled about is that I have 5 receivers that are the number 1 receiver on their team.
Yeah.
Like straight up. And I was able to get them as late as the 8th round. I mean, I know people are down on Jacoby Myers, but he's a good receiver. And the New England Patriots offense, I don't even want to talk about it for the season because it was bonkers, but Myers is a good receiver and he's a target hog. So I was excited about that. Josh Allen, it was like, okay, if I'm in the middle of the third round, I might as well. And he has consistently been the QB1 or the QB2. So it's like I'm getting one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the league almost guaranteed. I think later on, I do want to talk a little bit about KJ Osborne. And the reason I'm interested in Osborne this year, I was already excited about him last year because I think he has a lot of talent. But what intrigues me about him now is I'm really curious what happens with Adam Thielen after this year. I'm curious if he continues to play or if he continues to see a decline. And if Thielen continues to decline because he's hitting, I think he's hitting age 30 after this year. And that's where
I think he's over 30. I think 31, 32, 33. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we usually start to see drop off from receivers at 29, and he's well past that. So he'll likely continue to decline.
32.
Yeah,
Right?
he'll be 33 when the season starts.
So I'm hoping Osborne kind of takes over that number 2 role. And then because I didn't get Travis Kelce like I was hoping, I was like, I'm going to take a tight end as late as possible. I'm not messing with any of the mid-tier tight ends because when I could get Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, why am I going to mess around with any other tight end?
100%. I had 2 guys. I kind of knew I was going to get Kelce, but there was the chance that Josh was not going to take McCaffrey at 1. Chikakonkwo, Greg Dulcich both went crazy late, and those would have been guys that I was eyeballing as well. So, I like your Zamir White pick. That was the last player on my queue. I was hoping to get him in my last pick where I took Kenneth Gainwell. Zamir White, obviously, as of this moment, I believe the only running back on roster for the Las Vegas Raiders when they start next year. So,
yeah,
it's all right. Damian Harris is coming in. He's going to be the starting running back in Vegas. So,
yeah, there you go. Josh, you've been predicting that for months. So when it happens, you will be insufferable. As I mentioned, getting Kelce at 102, the positional advantage. I knew I was going to go running back for my next 2 picks. I wasn't sure if I was going to go 3. I hated wide receiver completely. I got scared off of no Tom Brady on Mike Evans. So Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker were no brainers to me. Aaron Jones is a little bit scarier because he is a very much a cut candidate for Green Bay. And then where does he end up in that situation? And then wide receiver just fell apart. If I'm going to pick somebody else's team, but I think my team is probably the team I hate the most in this entire draft with Michael Pittman, Cortland Sutton, and Brandon Ayuk at starting running back. I'm hoping we see an improved Cortland Sutton. But just all in all, this was not what I was looking for. Chase Claypool's an interesting prospect. The Bears gave a lot for him. Is he going to be given that chance? Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy who I was very down on. But
that's who I was going to take at the 212.
Yeah, I was looking at him.
12-12, yeah. I had him queued up, and then he went. I'm like, God damn it, Ryan.
Yeah, us picking next to each other.
I ended up siding with Thornton as a result. So.
And then I should have probably went wide receiver with my last pick, but there was not a single dart throw that I was super interested in. Hardman was a great pick. I probably would have taken him. So Kenneth Gainwell at running back, because again, this is a situation where if Miles Sanders isn't back, maybe they just roll the dice. So in a draft like this, that's kind of what you'd be looking for, is just, are there dice rolls out there? I am not happy with how my team turned out, and it's really going to have me questioning some of my draft strategy, because for those of you who draft with me, this is what my drafts are typically going to look like. My big flip would be going wide receiver where I took Aaron Jones and then kind of alternating running back, wide receiver. It's how I like to build teams. Kyler Murray was one of the last quarterbacks I was interested in with the rushing upside. I was kind of hoping to hear Cliff Kingsbury got fired, so now I feel a lot better about having Kyler Murray as my starting quarterback. Joshua, who's your favorite team in the draft if you had a chance to look them over?
I was kind of going through and looking at some of them. I really like Matty at the 109, starting with Derrick Henry, going Nick Chubb, DK Metcalf. I think even, regardless of whether Geno Smith is back or not, DK is a solid wide receiver, and it definitely has that, wide receiver 1 upside, and to get that in the 3rd round, I think is plenty fun. TJ Hawkinson, it seems to be that he's the Tyler Higbee in this offense. He's going to command a lot of targets, and he's the next guy after Justin Jefferson. And when you're targeting tight ends in fantasy football, ideally you want them to be either the number 1 target in the offense, or at minimum the number 2, or potentially maybe the number 3 in a very high passing volume type of offense. So I'm plenty fine with TJ Hawkinson in the 4th. I think Cam Akers is a nice dart throw considering how he ended the season. Definitely going to be a lot of question marks there, but this bunch of wide receivers afterwards, I think there's a good mix of upside that can, fill in with that wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. Jahan Dotson, I think, is going to be somebody that a lot of people are going to be talking about heading into year 2. He's another one. Depends on what Washington ultimately does at the quarterback position, because, if they're going to throw the ball 550 times, Jahan Dotson should very easily see over 100 targets in that offense. Yeah. And I think that has wide receiver 2 upside written all over it. Bateman, obviously, we need him back healthy, but him being a wide receiver 1 in a low passing volume offense, I think definitely hurts him. Tony's a huge wild card. Jerry Jeudy, I've been very vocal about my love for Courtland Sutton over Jerry Jeudy. Here's the thing. I won't be shocked if Jerry Jeudy actually gets traded. I think this is going to be, because keep in mind, they signed Tim Patrick to a big deal. They signed Courtland Sutton to a big deal.
And
Jerry Jeudy's coming up on an extension. He's entering in year 4. And we saw some of these wide receivers over the last few years that as they're getting into those extension signing years, when you have the cap tied up in other positions, or in this case, the same position, you don't have the type of money to sign Jerry Jeudy to what would constitute a market deal to stick around. So if you can trade him to potentially get back some draft capital that you've traded to get your quarterback, or who knows, maybe even to get your head coach, it's going to make a lot of sense to move on from Jerry Jeudy. And really, I think a prime trade candidate here is the Chicago Bears. You get a good young wide receiver with a good young quarterback and let them kind of grow together. That would make a lot of sense. I don't know how that's going to play out, because Chicago has the number 1 pick and they don't have their 2nd round pick.
Yeah.
Because
that's another thing, Josh, where you brought up 2024 might come into play there. But Jerry Jeudy and Chris Olave could be a fun experiment too, if they're willing to just use that in the trade. Austin,
it's pretty clear they're moving on from Michael Thomas.
Yeah, they better. Austin, were you able to pick a favorite team out?
Yeah, my favorite team is actually Joel's.
Okay.
And some of this was because, Joel's playing to one of the co-hosts by picking Kyle Pitts and keeping the faith in the number 4 overall pick in the 2021 draft. But for real, though, we didn't see Kyle Pitts play in an offense led by Desmond Ridder.
Nope.
And Ridder, he still got some work to do. But
certainly,
I liked that offense more when Desmond Ridder was under center than when Marcus Mariota was. One of the things early in the season, people were complaining about Kyle Pitts' usage, and it was not his usage. It was the fact that Marcus Mariota couldn't get him the damn ball. Yeah. And Ridder looks more confident passing the ball, and so I really do want to see what that offense looks like with Ridder under center. And I love the receivers that Joel was getting early on by punting at running back until later on. And I mean, Khalil Herbert in the 7th round, like, he could end up being a top 12 running back next year easily.
Joel is the lead of the hype train of Khalil Herbert with no questions asked.
And it's well warranted. Khalil Herbert, he's a great athlete.
5.4 yards a carry, I think, this year or something like that. So
exactly. One thing I'm going to kind of steal your thunder, Ryan, and pick a oops at the draft, because I want to come back to a player that you drafted, who is Kyler Murray. Here's my only thing about Kyler Murray. We don't know if he's going to start week 1 of the 2023 season. He underwent ACL surgery. And so he might still be recovering from that injury. And even if he's fully back, it's probably going to take a few weeks for him to get back up to speed. And so I think it's fine where you took him because it's so late, but I could see Kyler Murray. Yeah, I could see Kyler Murray really falling in drafts if there's uncertainty about when he starts next year.
Oh, I love that. And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't look at the show sheet. I forgot I ended up changing it to oops of the draft. But I'm going to go with the way I did this before, and it's my least favorite team. And if you need proof that this isn't scripted, my least favorite team is Josh's favorite team. I am not big on Maddie's team whatsoever. The running backs are fine, but this is a full PPR league, and we just don't know if they're aging, involvement. DK Metcalf is fine. I'm not fully bought in on TJ Hawkinson, which I know Josh is. This is going to come down to conflicts of thinking between me and Josh. I'm certainly not bought in on Cam Akers and never will be. And then there's so many questions at these wide receivers. Which Denver Broncos offense do we get? Josh, you kind of told the story for me on Rashad Bateman. But in a league where you have to start 3 wide receivers, I don't know who his third wide receiver is going to be. I don't know who their flex positions are going to be. And I hate Daniel Jones. So Maddie, this team could work out great. It's clearly Josh's favorite team. I absolutely hate it. It's just not a move for me. Also, Michael, not a Debo guy at all. Not happening. So,
I was about to say, I mean, you're downplaying Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb in PPR drafts.
I know.
Running back 4 and running back 6.
And Chubb finally
PPR
caught a
scoring.
receiving touchdown yesterday. So I agree. It could be something very different. But
when you're rushing for 1,400 plus yards and combining for 25 touchdowns,
it overdoes the PPR.
But I will say there's only one running back since like 2000 that has run for 1,400 yards in consecutive seasons. It's Derrick Henry. Yep. And so we've seen that he is kind of the only running back that can actually keep up that.
And it's usage. The constant question of when is it going to stop and is it going to stop? So like I said, I'm probably wrong. I'm wrong more than I'm right. We all are. That's just how it goes. First and foremost, everybody tuned in, everybody who drafted with us, we could not thank you enough. This show will be a weekly show, probably starting sometime in March, just depending on when I get the itch. And we're going to start with a lot of dynasty focused and rookie focused stuff, and then slide into best ball and redraft. We have guests on that specialize in IDP, best ball, DFS. It's going to be probably Austin with me a lot. Josh joins us a lot. It's going to be a really fun show. So we ask you guys to tune in. Josh, before I get us out of here, letting them know what we'll be doing this offseason, or unless you're about to do it right now, talk to the people, tell them bye, thank them for tuning in.
Well, the first thing I just want to say, thanks everybody that stuck with us throughout 2022 and even the seasons prior. I mean, at the end of the day, we do this to entertain and have fun. And, we're talking sports with friends, and we like to include the audience as friends in that conversation. So, if you're new to this stream, make sure you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page. If you're catching this after the fact, maybe on a different platform or channel, it's youtube.com/Club Fantasy FFL. We do jersey giveaways all the time. We're so close to 500 subscribers. And once we hit 500, I'm taking all of the public profiles that have subscribed. I'm putting them on a wheel. If you're not a public profile, maybe you have it set on private for some other weird reason, I don't know. Make sure you DM one of us, show us a screenshot of your subscription so I can add you to that wheel. Whoever wins the wheel, I'm letting you choose what prize you want. You have the choice to decide between a Nick Chubb signed Brown jersey, a Stephon Diggs signed Bills jersey, or a Mark Andrews signed Ravens mini helmet. I want to give you this. So let's not let it continue to sit in my closet and collect dust. I want to give this to you. So hit subscribe, share it with your friends. We like to have fun, entertain. This is what we do. And at the end of the day, we do this not really to get paid, because none of us get paid. We actually end up putting more money into this than anything else. So but that's where, we get these fun little, sponsorships and stuff like we have with Manscaped.
Which we didn't talk about one time in the show.
Damn it, Ryan, you suck at this.
Honestly, just wasn't even forgetting about it. Guys, Manscaped puts a wonderful product together. Josh, myself, and Joe Zolo, our co-host, were able to get our hands on these for free. This is a 100% sponsored ad, so we partnered with them, and you're able to get 20% off of any order and free shipping if you use promo code Club Fantasy during checkout. We've raved about these products, and one of the things I really enjoyed about working with Manscaped is they told us, don't start talking about our product until you've used our product, and don't say anything you don't believe in. We've all used it. We've all raved about it. Obviously, it's below the waist grooming, but they do all sorts of things. They do different kinds of deodorants. One of me and Josh's favorite things is what's called the weed whacker. As you get older, hair starts to pop out of your ear and nose, unfortunately. And when you're a mustache guy, you don't want hair continuing over your entire body. So it keeps everything nice and trimmed out. It's a really great product. So again, I'm going to leave this scroll up for the rest of the show. Check out Manscaped. It's one of the easiest ways you can support the show. You're getting something great for yourself, and it makes us look a little bit better. I was just about to get into the fact that we don't do a ton of written content during the postseason, but Austin, you're one of the few people who have an article that does play into the postseason a little bit. So tell everybody what you do for Club Fantasy. Tell people where they can find you. And I know, are you still doing the racing thing? If so, talk to them about that. So
Yeah, I mean, the off season hasn't started for me yet. I'm still doing our weekly DFS Cash article. It's called the A List. You can catch it on Club Fantasy, and I tweet it out every week. I'm really excited to get into this wild card weekend matchup, and we're going to go all the way through to the Super Bowl. And so we'll end with a showdown lineup that hopefully can win you some money. I'll probably start throwing some tournament stuff in here too, because as we lose the number of games that we can play in, it starts to get more interesting to join those tournament lineups. And I'll talk a little strategy of how you can pick contests that are easier to win, and then, the giant tens of thousands of people setting lineups for these single game contests. But we'll be doing that throughout the entire postseason. So stick around. Comes out weekly on Fridays or Saturdays, usually Fridays. But that's it for me right now. And you can get me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL.
Perfect. As I mentioned, our written content especially starts to die down a little bit in the postseason. Austin does his DFS article. Joel does his actual blurred lines betting article. So you'll be able to find that. However, the live streams every Wednesday, we are going to be here for you. For the next month, we're going to be here on Thursdays to kind of hold ourselves accountable to our rankings. And the Monday show is going to continue. So for the postseason, we are going to shift back to Monday Anxiety starting next week. As the postseason ends, I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break before we kick into Mock Draft Monday. So then there will be a little bit of a lull there. But very next week, Josh and I will be here talking NFL playoffs, trying to rope in the fantasy implications. But that show's really just about bitching and moaning and crying about what happened the day before, and crying about if we drank too much the day before. That's the Josh part, not the me part. So it's all going to be a really good time. But I think Josh hit the nail perfectly on the head. Make sure you're following Club Fantasy. We go live at least twice a week for the most part. We're going to be here to help you with any fantasy questions. We get those on air. We try to interact with the viewers as much as possible. We want you to be a part of our family here, so make sure you get that subscribe button. Maybe you can win some free jerseys. So for Josh, Austin, myself, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back on Wednesday this week with our flagship show, No Pun Intended, where we are going to start looking at what went wrong and what went right for 8 NFL teams. Everybody have a great Monday. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck if your team's still in